Okay, this guy's especially deluded. Let's take him down. And I looked at him. I said, David, you realize that book you're holding is not trustworthy. And he looked up at me and he closed the Bible and he said, go on. Which should have been an indication for me that things weren't going to go my way, but whatever, I missed it. Go on. I said, first off, what you're reading is in English. But Jesus, of course, did not speak English. Jesus spoke Aramaic. The earliest church was a Hebrew church. They probably spoke Hebrew. And then by the time the New Testament was written, it was written in Greek. So by the time you actually have the written words of Jesus, it's a translation of a translation. You're telling me nothing was lost in translation? And then the church had the Bible in Latin for over 1,000 years. For the longest span of the Bible, it was in Latin, the Latin Vulgate. So that was another translation. And from there it was translated into German before it came into English. So you got a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation by the time you get the Bible in English. And that's why you have so many different versions of the Bible. The ESV, the KJV, the NIV, the NRSV, the NASB, the who knows what V. You got so many versions of the Bible. How do I know what's the actual Word of God? Now, I had shared that challenge with many people before, and usually people just backed off and they said they had no idea why. They just believed by faith. The word faith was a synonym for ignorance for most Christians. But David was different. He looked at me and he said, Nabeel, let me ask you a question. A few minutes ago, I heard you speaking to your mother on the phone. Were you talking in English? I said, no. And he said, but when you told me what you talked about, you told me in English. Was that a bad translation? No. He says, Nabeel, you're bilingual. What you hear in one language, you can share in another language without losing the message. And that's exactly what the disciples did. No matter what language Jesus spoke, he might have spoken Greek, but no matter what language he spoke, they accurately translated that into the Greek. And of that Greek New Testament, we have in our possession today over 5,500 manuscripts. We know what the New Testament originally says. And he said, if we lost all those Greek New Testament manuscripts, let's just say they all evaporated all of a sudden, we have over 10,000 Latin, Coptic, and Syriac translations of the New Testament from ancient times. We could reconstruct the entire message all over again, many times over. And he said, even if we didn't have any of those, if they all just went away, we have over 30,000 quotations of the New Testament from the early church fathers within 150 years after Jesus, who were writing letters or giving sermons and quoting from the Bible, from which we could reconstruct virtually the entire New Testament many times over again. Nabeel, we know with certainty what the original New Testament said.